I am Emma Rawlinson. I am not a midwife. I'm not clinical in any way. I'm a mum of 2 children, both born in Gloucestershire. So my little girl Sophia was born 4.5 years ago at the Avita Birth Centre in Cheltenham. It's like a lifetime ago now. She's just started school. And then my little boy Ethan was born in Gloucester Birth Unit on New Year's Day 2018. So he's going to be 3 in January, which again has absolutely flown by. So I'm basically here as the chair of the MVP. And I guess the reason I wanted to get involved with the MVP in the first place, and again, I'll explain a little bit more about sort of who we are and what we do in a sec. But yeah, for me, I think I had really positive experiences on the whole in both pregnancies and births and afterwards. But I know that's not the case for everybody. And I think that personally, I don't think there's anything bigger that you can do in life than having a baby and becoming a parent. And I think that, you know, everybody should be given the opportunity to have as positive an experience as possible. So yeah, that's why I wanted to get involved. The MVP, Maternity Voices Partnership, we are an independent organisation. So I think that's really important to say. We're not part of the hospital, so we're not clinical ourselves. We're not midwives. We are an independent organisation, and we are basically made up of mums, dads, partners, families, and then the professionals from the maternity services. And the idea is that we're all working together to try and help improve things, to try and help shape maternity services locally. And as I just said, like, I sort of wanted to get involved because of my own positive experiences. But I think it's really important that the people who've actually used services give their feedback and give their views on how those services are sort of run and shaped. So that's the idea. I'll talk a little bit more later about how you can kind of get involved and how you can feed your views and your sort of voice into what we do. But yeah, that's basically the structure. So we, every year, I mean, we've been going like nearly 2 years now, but only officially sort of 1.5 years we've sort of launched. We're still quite new, but basically at the beginning of the year, we as an MVP project team sat down and agreed our priorities for the year. So I'm not going to go into all of those now, but basically it's sort of taken from feedback that we've had from when we've been out and about talking to women and families, things that have come up time and again. So sort of themes of anything that we think we've identified as maybe needing improvement or needing more of a focus. Obviously in discussions sort of with the hospital as well. So for anything that they particularly want to get feedback on or anything they've identified as maybe needing improvement. So we set out a number of priorities at the beginning of the year. And just 2 I wanted to touch on quickly were around choice and personalisation, and then infant feeding. So choice and personalisation for me, it's basically, you know, no 2 women, no 2 pregnancies, no 2 births are the same. And actually what's important for you and what you want from your pregnancy and your birth might be totally different to somebody else. And what we want to try and help ensure is that everybody basically has all the information that they need so that they can feel empowered to make the decisions that are best for them and their families. So that's the idea, is basically saying, yes, you know, we obviously want advice from the midwives as to what's going to be sort of safe for you and for your baby, but it's your baby, it's your pregnancy, it's your birth, and you should be able to have a choice in what you want from it. So that's the idea. And I think infant feeding for me really ties into that. Because again, we want to make sure you've got all the information available to you. You understand all the different options when it comes to infant feeding, because actually there's a lot of different ways that you can feed your baby. It's not like there's a set rule. And making sure that, again, that you feel empowered to sit down with your partner, your family, your support network, whoever it is that's supporting you throughout your journey as a parent, and make sure that you're making the right decision for you and what fits for you and your family. So when we sort of been out, I mean, we haven't been anywhere for a long time, obviously, as everyone else. But when we used to go out and talk to people in the community and ask for their feedback and, you know, their experiences of what their pregnancy has been like and everything else, and afterwards, because we sort of cover basically from as soon as you find out you're pregnant till about 2 years after you've had your baby, roughly. Almost always we would end up in that conversation talking about infant feeding. I think that a lot of people have got something they want to say about their experiences, whether that's positive or negative. And I think it's just a very sort of emotional subject for a lot of people, whether it worked out exactly as you wanted to, whether it didn't, whether you felt like you had amazing support, whether you felt like you were lacking in support. And just a few of the kind of key themes that we've had when we've been talking to people have been that they've actually found the whole experience of infant feeding, and I don't mean necessarily just breastfeeding, I mean infant feeding and the whole shebang. They found it quite stressful. They found it hard work, and it's, again, sometimes that's sort of finding what you want to do with it, but the whole thing is quite hard work. And I think people have asked for more openness and honesty around the first few weeks, because I think the first few weeks after having a baby can be really difficult, and I think that we just want to be more open about that and have conversations about what it's like realistically. People have said they've received mixed or conflicting advice. Now, you probably already know, from the moment you're pregnant, everyone that you meet will have a piece of advice for you. They don't all agree. And, you know, especially if you've got sort of older relatives or things like that, there can be some quite old school views, and it's really difficult. You know, you want to make the right decision for you and your families. And I think that people do get mixed views and advice from people. And then the other big thing that's come through for us as well, is that people want more infant feeding support generally, not just breastfeeding. They want to know all about infant feeding and all the options that are available to them. So that's kind of why we picked those two things as like big priorities for us this year. And it's all about, say, empowering you and your families to make the choices that fit for you and your family. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah in a second. So I don't know if, Hannah, you can just introduce yourself as well and sort of explain why you're involved. But Hannah's going to talk a little bit about the amazing event that we were planning that had to be cancelled, and basically what we've been doing virtually during this pandemic. So yeah, I'll keep an eye. If you want to ask any questions, say just tick anonymously if you don't want your name to come up. But anything that you ask, I'll either pop it through to Hannah as we're talking, or we can come back to it at the end. Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Emma. Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm one of the Maternity Voices volunteers. I started volunteering with MVP in December. I'm a mum of two myself. I have a 3-year-old daughter who's just gone to preschool, and a 1-year-old son. Both of my children were born at the truly amazing Stroud Maternity unit. And although I volunteer with MVP on a number of different things, as all our amazing volunteers do, breastfeeding is something that is very important to me personally. And I'm a trained peer supporter, and I do support women with breastfeeding. It's something that I feel very strongly about. So given that it's been one of MVP's priorities, I've dived straight in with a lot of that, and been really fortunate to be quite actively involved in a lot of it. I had quite a difficult feeding experience with my daughter, but I knew that I wanted to breastfeed, and I wasn't entirely convinced by all of the support that I had. And the more that I learn and the more that I know, the more I want to make sure that women do have all of that information available to them so that they can make their own decisions. As Emma said, we're not, as the MVP, we are not a breastfeeding organisation. We're not going to put that stance across and say that you must absolutely breastfeed your child. What we know from the feedback that we've received is that people want a lot more information about infant feeding as a whole. So we got together in December and we started planning what would have been a really fantastic feeding event that would have taken place in May. Now, of course, just as with pretty much everything else, that unfortunately did not go ahead. The plan for that was to really encourage women from all over the county to get together, to come to this feeding event, to be given information on breastfeeding. We were going to have a Q&A with the infant feeding coordinator, who I believe is coming up in this festival later on. So she was coming to do a Q&A with us, which we were really excited about. We also were going to have representations from breastfeeding support organisations in our community, who again I know will be coming up in the festival later on, which is just fantastic. But alongside that, we were also going to have some demonstrations about how to make up safely infant formula, some information on the difference between breast milk and infant formula. So and also how to feed bottles safely and responsibly, because a lot of the time we know from feedback that we do hear that when breastfeeding ends, or when someone decides not to breastfeed, they can sometimes feel really left out of things and really unsupported. So we wanted to make sure that we had a real variety and a real mix, that we covered all bases, so that we were really putting women in a position where they could have all of this evidence-based information, and they could then make their own informed decisions, judgment-free. So that was our plan for May, and we were really excited about it. And of course, unfortunately, that didn't happen. The other thing that we wanted to include in that, which I personally feel is very important, no matter how you choose to feed your baby, is about how families and your support network can support you with that side of things. So what we actually did instead is we put our heads together and we looked at things, and we said, well, we can't do our lovely event, so what can we do in place of that? And what we did was we created some Facebook Live videos initially to start off with. So one of the areas, the key areas that we knew women wanted more information, was about information and honesty, as Emma said, around the early days of what breastfeeding looks like. So I went to Stroud Maternity and I interviewed Sophie Ferguson, the infant feeding coordinator, and she came along with all her props and her knitted boobs and her bottles and all the rest of it. And she answered some questions that we'd received about that, and gave some really, really fantastic information about feeding babies under 6 weeks. So covering things like, how do I know that feeding is going well? What do I do if I think it's not going well and I'm in pain? Where can I go to for support? How do I know that I'm producing enough milk and that my baby is getting enough milk? Questions around, how do I give my baby a bottle if I choose to do that? When and how can I look at expressing milk? Also looking at what comes out of the baby and using that as an indicator to know how effectively breastfeeding is going at the start, because obviously at the moment, particularly in the early stages of the pandemic as well, we know that women were really struggling to access face-to-face support, and in particular were worried about whether or not their babies were gaining enough weight. So Sophie had some really, really fantastic information on that. And if you go to our Facebook page, which is Gloucestershire Maternity Voices, that video is still available to watch. So please do give it a look if you're sitting there and you are expecting a baby, or you've just had a baby and you think, actually, I could do with looking at some of this information, or I know somebody that has. That video is still there, and it's jam-packed full of really fantastic information, which, if you're concerned about how to reach out for support, might just answer some of those questions for you. So that was the thing that we did in the first instance. And then we also decided that one of the issues that brought up was, yes, people wanted to know about feeding babies under 6 weeks, which is really important. But what happens when you get to that 6 weeks and you still have questions? Because breastfeeding changes, babies change, they get bigger. When do we introduce solids? And looking at also things like what happens if all of a sudden things are not going so well. So looking at some of those common problems that crop up, such as colic, thrush, mastitis, again, looking at expressing, because a lot of people decide that after about that 6 weeks period, when things are settled down, they want that more information about how to change breastfeeding and things like sleep. And so what we then did was we interviewed Sophie Ferguson again. She's absolutely fantastic. Can't fault her. She's a wealth of knowledge in our local community. And also Emma Cronin-Priest, who is the health visitor infant feeding specialist for babies over 6 weeks. So we did a Facebook Live again. This time we did it from our homes, and Emma was there as well, taking questions as we went. And we covered, again, a really, really vast amount of information in that. And that video, again, is also still available on our Facebook page. And it can be, that one I think covered so much that it can be a really good one just to keep going back to, because we really tried to cover some of those questions that are really, really common and crop up a lot of the time, especially because after 6 weeks, you may not still be seeing your health visitor, or you may not still be in contact with them. I know where some people are seeing them less and less at the moment, and you're likely to have been signed off by your midwife, and perhaps you have a question and you just don't know where to turn. Well, again, hopefully that video will in some part either lead you towards the answer or help you to find the person who can help you to answer that question for you. So those are 2 of the videos that we did. But being the breastfeeding flag bearer that I am, I thought, well, actually, there's some more information here that that we haven't covered. And in particular, I was aware of the fantastic work that was going on in our local community by local organisations who were normally, before the pandemic, were offering face-to-face support and groups. And those groups are obviously not running, but those organisations didn't just stop running and stop supporting mums. They changed what they were doing in fantastic ways. So I interviewed the fantastic chair of GBSN, Elizabeth Mayo, and we talked about what they'd been doing to support those mums who were just having their babies or who needed breastfeeding support and couldn't get to those groups. And they started offering one-to-one video consultations with breastfeeding counsellors. And I know that you are speaking to GBSN later on, but they're still running that, and they're also running preparing to breastfeed workshops as well. They're doing some fantastic work, and BFN are doing some wonderful work. So I did an interview with GBSN, and again, that's still available to watch on our Facebook page. Should you feel that you want to go and check that out, please do. So we've done quite a lot at that point, but as I'm sure many of you are aware, there are still questions that need answering. There are still bits of information and gaps missing. We know that breastfeeding is one of those things that is really sensitive. And although we've got some fantastic organisations running in the community, a lot of women find it really difficult to reach out for support, or they don't know where to turn to that support. So we also have in the pipeline a video with the Breastfeeding Network locally, who are hopefully looking into starting up their drop-in group at the hospital. Whether or not that's going to happen now that things seem to be going, you know, restrictions are becoming a little bit harder at the moment. I know that they're looking into how they can do that. So there's a video in the pipeline for that. And I've also created a video that is undergoing some editing and some subtitling about baby poo, which is really important, because one of the best ways of knowing what's going in and what's going right with feeding is to look at what's coming out the other end. And we covered in that breastfed poo, combination fed poo, allergy poo, formula fed poo, frequency of poo, colour, consistency, smell. It's a really, really fantastic video. And that is with a lovely friend of mine, Charlotte Tritle, who is studying to become a lactation consultant, and that video will be coming out soon. So do look at our both our website and our social media pages for more information on that, because those things are in the pipeline. We are, you know, infant feeding is something that is really, really important to us at MPP, and we are doing as much as we can to make sure that we're giving you that information, and we're also signposting to other organisations that are supporting breastfeeding mums, and other sources of information as well. So hopefully some of those are going to be really, really useful to you. Now, one thing that I have felt it's really, really important to say around breastfeeding in this pandemic, and our position on that as MVP is, we do have a lot of support in Gloucestershire. We really do. We can't fault the amazing work that organisations like GBSN and BFN have done, The infant feeding team at the trust as well have worked really, really hard to try and adapt as quickly as possible to make sure that women are getting the support and the information that they need. However, we know that nationally, our breastfeeding rates before the pandemic were very, very low, and that often, for whatever reason, women don't access that support. They can't find it, or they don't get it from the places that they should get it from. And obviously, when the pandemic comes into play, that becomes even harder. We conducted a survey about 6 weeks ago where we looked at women's experiences of giving birth and care after they'd had their babies under Gloucestershire Trust over the time of the pandemic. And some of the information that we got back did talk specifically about breastfeeding and how many women felt that because they weren't able to stay in hospital for as long, or they didn't want to stay for as long because their partners couldn't be there, or because their siblings couldn't, older siblings couldn't visit. Some women felt that they actually felt a little bit rushed out of the door. They missed out on that feeding support. And maybe they didn't know about the fantastic organisations or the way to access support, or maybe they didn't feel comfortable or they accessed them. And actually we have to accept that although we are doing so much, online support cannot ever replace face-to-face support. And there are women in our community who didn't want to stop breastfeeding or didn't start breastfeeding even though they wanted to, and have a lot of emotions and feelings around that. I think it's really, really important that we say that the responsibility of that should never lie with the individual mum. A lot of guilt and judgment and blame gets thrown around when breastfeeding doesn't go to plan. But as the MVP, we want to make it absolutely clear that if your breastfeeding journey didn't work out the way that you wanted it to, no blame should be placed with you. There are a multitude of reasons as to why women stop breastfeeding, or why women don't start breastfeeding when they want to, or why they can't access the support that is available. The responsibility of that relies with society as a whole, which is a big part of what MVP does. We try to bring the voices of those women to the people that are offering support, and we try and hash it out and create resolutions. So if you're sitting there watching this and thinking, actually, I wasn't able to breastfeed, or I wasn't able to continue to breastfeed, or I had to stop, or I didn't get the support that I needed, we hear you, and we would really like to hear your experiences. And you can contact us via social media or via our website to share your experiences with us, because that's how changes become implemented, because we can take that information back and we can look at what we can do with it, and we can pass it on to the people who need to hear that. So I think it's really important that we remember that whilst it's brilliant to celebrate breastfeeding, and so important to celebrate breastfeeding because we have very low breastfeeding rates, and that doesn't mean that we only hear the voices of breastfeeding women. So we've got a question that's just come in that says, what top tips would you give to a mum wanting to breastfeed now in the pandemic when there isn't much face-to-face support? Okay, so really it depends on the mum's situation. So if you are expecting a baby right now and you're thinking, I really want to breastfeed, but I'm really concerned because I know that I can't just pop down the road to my local breastfeeding support group, there are some fantastic resources available to you to learn as much about breastfeeding before you have that baby. So GBSN are offering preparing to breastfeed workshops. They're also doing their absolute best to link that with mums who are relatively near you, so that you can meet some mum friends when hopefully all of this is over, that you can, or you can social distance meet up with them, which I think is really, really great. The ABM run a fantastic online course called Team Baby. The ABM also run a fantastic online support course, for your support network, because I think that's another really, really important thing at the moment, because we're not getting that support that we would love to have, and that I know those organisations and midwives and what have you would love to give, but that's not the same as it should be at the moment. So you're getting more support from your immediate support network, whether that be your friends, your family, your sister, your aunties, your uncles, grannies, mums, dads, partner, whatever. They need to clue themselves up on breastfeeding so that they can support you, because being a mum changes everything, and you're really hormonal, and sometimes you need someone to go, I remember this little bit of information, and actually cluster feeding is really normal. So I would say, firstly, if you haven't had your baby yet, clue yourself up and clue those around you up on breastfeeding and what's normal. As I say, GBSN, ABM, BFN, brilliant places to start. You'll find all of them on social media as well. If you've had your baby and you're looking for breastfeeding support, maybe you need a bit of reassurance, maybe you things are not going great and you need to talk to somebody. Again, GBSN, they are actually running some social groups outside as well, although I don't know how long that's going to continue with the weather. There are some brilliant Facebook groups as well. There's a fantastic Facebook group called Breastfeeding Yummy Mummies, where the moderating and admin team are all trained peer supporters or breastfeeding counsellors or support helpers, and they go all the way up to lactation consultants, all offering their time for free or evidence-based information. That's a really good one. There are some others out there as well. So social media can be a really, really good place to start. Amy Brown, fantastic Amy Brown, has just released a book that's called Let's Talk About What It's Like to Be New Parents. That's not the exact title, but if you look up Amy Brown, you'll find it, which would be a fantastic resource as well. But I would say it's about making sure that you know about breastfeeding and that the people around you do too, and knowing where to access that support. So if you're in Gloucestershire and you've just had a baby and your baby is under 6 weeks old, you can contact the infant feeding coordinator, that's Sophie Ferguson. If you call the switchboard and say into it, infant feeding team, you'll get put through. If your baby is over 6 weeks, you want to talk to the infant feeding health visitor. The same applies. You can also be referred through your midwife or your health visitor at any point to those two different services. Health visitors if baby's over 6 weeks, infant feeding team and infant feeding coordinator if they're under 6 weeks. We've got a few more questions coming in. So if I wanted to share my experience to MVP, how is best to do this? Direct message on Facebook, Insta, email, what would be the next steps? Okay, really good question. Any of the above, really. Probably Facebook or email. Emma, what are we like on Insta at the moment?
We're on there. We don't have as many followers, but we're on there. So to be honest, I mean, I'll cover that in a second in more detail, but yeah, any way you like, basically. The easiest way for you, there'll be someone that picks it up on any of those channels.
Brilliant. Okay, so sorry, I was just taking some questions there. Sorry. So I've gone a little bit off where I wanted to talk about. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all from me. I'm going to hand back to Emma, who's going to tell you all about how you can get involved with MVP, because I know this is specifically looking at young mums, and young mums' voices don't get heard as much as they should. We know that when they're breastfeeding, when they're not breastfeeding, when they're pregnant, and as Maternity Voices, we want to share everybody's voices. So if you're looking at this and thinking, you know what, actually, I've got something to say, there's lots of ways that you can get involved with us. And we're lovely. And we also, before the pandemic, used to meet for lovely cups of tea in places all over Gloucestershire. And now we do Zoom meetings. So if you're sitting there thinking, I can't possibly get out to a meeting, you don't have to. You can sit in your pajamas and chat to us. So I'm going to pass over to Emma. But I do just want to say that if you are a breastfeeding young mum, well done to you. You're doing a fantastic job. And I do hope that you will check out some of those resources as well as checking us out as MVP on social media. Thanks, Emma.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, loads of information there. I hope that was really helpful for lots of you. Just to add to that as well, I think about what Hannah just said in terms of where you can access support. I think from my personal experiences as well, I would just say, don't be afraid to reach out for support. Don't think ever, if you're having any sort of challenges, that you are alone, because there are people out there having the exact same things as you. Don't ever feel like you're failing, you're not, basically just don't be afraid, because there are so many people that can support you, whether that is these sort of professional organisations, peer organisations, or your friends and family. And as Hannah said, like, your network of people around you are really important. So it's important to make sure that they understand what it is that you want, and that they know how to support you. But don't be afraid to ask, because literally there'll be someone having the exact same struggle as you. But yes, so thank you. Yeah, Hannah's made a really good point there as well, that like, it's so important that we hear from everyone. So as I said, we're made up of mums, partners, dads, families, and then the professionals. So I attend a lot of meetings with our local maternity system. So at those meetings, and again, these are virtual now, they used to be face-to-face, I'm there with like heads of service, I'm there with midwives, I'm there with health visitors, GPs, like a whole range of people. And they're genuinely really interested in what the MVP and what the families we've spoken to have to say, because again, like I said at the beginning, it's so important to capture the views and the experiences of people who actually use their services. The professionals might be thinking they've got everything perfectly set up, but they don't know unless somebody tells them that there's an issue, or actually maybe there's something that they're doing really well that we should sort of highlight. It doesn't have to be negative. So we would love to hear from you. It's totally up to you how you get involved. If you literally just want to drop us a message anonymously, you can do, and just give some feedback. If you want to get more involved, you can do. And again, it's not like you sign up to something and then you're kind of locked in. It's totally up to you. People dip in and out. And I think we all respect as well that, people join at different points in their life. And if you're joining, we had a few people that joined when they were pregnant, came along a bit at the beginning, and then, they found it too difficult to come to the meetings. So it's totally up to you. If you're interested in letting us know your experiences, and that can be, it doesn't have to be feeding related, it could be anything to do with your pregnancy, your birth, your postnatal sort of care and support after you've had your baby, please get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you, and like, your voice genuinely does matter. Doesn't matter if it's one tiny little thing you want to say, you could make a real difference for your next baby, for somebody else's baby. Like, your views really matter. So please do let us know if there's anything you want to share at all, positive, negative, constructive, anything at all. So yeah, as Hannah said, social media. So we've got a Facebook page and an Instagram page. So please give both of them a follow if you don't already. So you can direct message us on those. You can email us. We've got a website as well. And again, there's like a contact, all our contact details are on there. So yeah, please let us know your experiences. So even if it's one tiny little thing. I mean, I remember when we went to, again, when we used to be able to, we went around the hospital and we spoke to new mums and got their views. And actually there were little things like, there's a really annoying light above my head and I can't sleep, that no one would, like, it's not a big deal, but actually by telling us and we were able to feed that could make a real difference to the next person that's staying in that bay, if they're able to shade it slightly. It's really important little things. Just checking, that's just some information. Yeah, so you can get in touch with your experiences that way. If you want to get involved, there's loads of different ways you can do that. So again, if you follow us, if you're on our Facebook page, if you like and follow our Facebook page, we share a lot of useful stuff on there, I think. A lot of resources to other organisations. Lots, again, right now as well, obviously we're sharing updates from the Hospitals Trust on all the sort of restrictions and the latest guidelines. But we're also sort of sharing, yes, a lot of information for you, and as much as we can, helpful stuff during this pandemic as well. So do give us a follow. So we've got some loads of really good videos on there. Again, not just necessarily infant feeding, but we've done videos around water births, home births, all that kind of thing as well. So lots of different topics. But we do quite often go on our Facebook page and our Instagram page to ask you for your views and feedback on particular issues. So if you don't want to be involved in person and you don't want to attend any sort of meeting, whether that's virtual or in person or whatever, but you've got something to say on a particular topic, and we'd love for you to contribute that way. If you do want to get more involved, we've got a closed Facebook group as well. So basically on there, that's where we have more in-depth sort of discussions around our priorities, obviously events, things that we're planning for the future. So again, you can come in there and kind of have a little look around if you want. It might be that you've got one particular sort of experience or topic that you feel really passionately about and you just kind of want to contribute to that one thing. That's fine. And as Hannah said, we used to meet in cafes. So like literally it would be crazy. It'd be like 5 to 10 of us, and then as many children or more. Absolute carnage. Now they're on Zoom, probably like just as much carnage, I would say, with the kids there. But like it's a really friendly group. Like pretty much all of us are mums on there as well, so we've all been there, or we are there currently having the same issues as you. But yeah, you can get involved that way. And again, you don't have to come along to every meeting if you can't make it. We alternate them. We try and do a Thursday and then a Friday each month to let some people come to, others if you're part working and stuff like that. But yeah, you can come along to whatever you like. And if there is just a particular thing that we're working on and you think, oh, actually, that really relates to me and my experience, and I want to just feed into that, but I'm not interested in doing all the other stuff, then that's fine. But yeah, totally up to you. So again, you can message us on any of those platforms or email us if you want to get involved. On our website as well, we've got a fairly new-ish volunteer form. So it's really short. You can just leave your contact details on there with a bit of information as to kind of like how involved you think you might want to be. And then again, one of us will get in touch with you. It'll probably be me that drops you an email to say hello and see, if you've got a particular thing that you want to get involved with. But yeah, it's really important to us, as Hannah says, that we hear voices from everyone. And like I say, even the smallest thing makes a difference. It can make a difference to someone else. And we do want to hear from everyone. Like we'd love for our project team, I think Hannah would probably agree with me, I'd love for our team to be more diverse as well, with more diverse experiences, because I think a lot of us have been through similar things or have similar backgrounds, and we all want to make sure we're capturing everybody's views and that we can feed that back to the people that are actually in charge, so that we can make a difference. So yeah, please get involved. Any experiences at all, so whether that's pregnancy, birth, aftercare, so up to about 2 years after having your baby, but we're always interested to hear your views anyway. And yeah, and if you want to get more involved, then we'd love to have you on the team. So it's a really nice friendly bunch. You can get as involved as you want to, dip in and out as and when life gets chaotic and stressful.
And sometimes just getting involved can just be, oh, they've got a survey out.
Oh, perfect.
I went through that. I can fill that in. If you feel you can't commit, so you're involving yourself and making a big difference just by following our social media page.
Yeah.
We hope anyway, but it would be lovely to see some of you on our team at our next meeting.
Yeah, it would. So yeah, feel free to contact us in any of the ways that we've said. If you've got any questions, I'm sure Kirsty can get in touch with us if there's anything you want to know after this meeting. And again, so send us a message. If there's ever anything you want to feed back and you want it to remain anonymous, just tell us and we promise we'll keep that private and anonymous, and just feed your experiences back. But I think, is that pretty much it from us, Hannah? I don't think I've got...
I think so. The only thing whilst you were talking that I thought I would just quickly mention, particularly in response to that question that came up earlier, is during World Breastfeeding Week, I also interviewed the absolutely amazing, bit of a hero of mine, chair of the Association of Breastfeeding Mothers, Emma Pickett, who talked about how our bodies make milk. And it was just really, really empowering. I think it was one of those things that I think everybody should see, that they should really know about, because if you're a breastfeeding mum and you want to have a look at it, it will sort of tell you, actually, your body's really amazing. And the same if you're just a pregnant mum, or if you're supporting somebody who is pregnant or just had a baby, it might just make you kind of go, whoa, that's really cool. So that might be another one to check out, because that's got some really awesome information in it. And Emma Pickett, she just talks beautifully about the topic. She's fantastic. So that might be worth checking out too.
Yeah, awesome. So I think that's pretty much it from us. And so unless anyone has any last minute questions, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So thank you very much for having us. It's been great being here. And yeah, we'd love to speak to some of you soon.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Thanks very much. Bye.